Lately, I've been doing a lot of video interviews with astrologers who have what seems to be a pretty profound interest in the science of astrology. You'll see the videos on this channel with Nadia Moreau, who was a nuclear physicist, has a deep interest in science and astrology. Also, I've done numerous videos with Ernst Wilhelm, who likes to explore the idea of Brihat Parashara Horashastra and Jaimini as being a true scientific approach, systematic approach to astrology that we're rediscovering. And over the years, as I've been studying these things and exploring these things, one important topic came to mind. And it came out of the debate between what is more accurate or what is more true, the tropical or the sidereal zodiac. And that's a pretty consistent debate between oftentimes Western astrologers and Vedic astrologers or Eastern astrologers. And there's even Western astrologers who use the sidereal zodiac, and there are Vedic astrologers who use the tropical zodiac. But I've never really been one, generally speaking, to just be taught something and then leave it at that. You know, those of you who've tuned into my Kriya Yoga online channel where I talked about early experiences and spiritual development, how I used to get kicked out of my Catholic Sunday school class when I was a kid, because I would ask them questions about the Bible. They would start talking about the Bible and we'd be studying it. And I had serious questions as a little kid. And so they thought I was just being difficult. So they kicked me out and I would sit in the bathroom waiting for my parents to come pick me up, hoping they didn't find out I wasn't actually in my Sunday school class. But anyway, so I've always wanted to know a little bit more about what's really behind these things. And I'll admit that for the first many years of my astrological exploration, I really didn't think about it too much. I just had some good teachers who did astrology very well. They did well. I thought, well, if they do well, I do what they do. It'll all work out great. But as the years went by, I became a little more interested in the background and the history of what many astrologers say, the statements that they make. And I discovered some interesting things. So today, I'm sharing this with you just to give you something to think about. This is not any kind of preaching or trying to get you to change your belief systems or your views. I'm just wanting you to consider some different ideas that you may or may not have approached before. And what is that? Well, when it came to the debate between the tropical and sidereal zodiac, one of the arguments that sidereal Vedic astrologers always put forth was this idea that, well, if you look out in the sky and you see Jupiter in the constellation of Leo, well, then you know the sidereal zodiac is correct. And that was always that's always what they would say. It was like, this is an observational astrology, so go look and see. And I did that, and that's why I put a lot of faith in sidereal astrology for a while, because I thought, well, they're right. You know, that makes sense. But the more I got into Vedic astrological texts and started reading them firsthand, not just picking up books like Beneath a Vedic Sky or books by other famous authors who are just interpreting what, say, Brihat Parashara Horashastra has to say, or Sarvarta Chintamani, or Brihat Jataka, or whatever it might be, not interpreting them, but actually going back and reading them, I noticed a few things, and it got me thinking. First of all, I noticed repeated over and over and over again that the signs were said to be 30 degrees, which makes sense. If you have 12 signs of 30 degrees each, you're going to have 360 degrees, which is a circle, which is what the zodiac is. So that started to come into my mind. And I started considering, all right, well, that's interesting, because really, how big are these constellations? And I dug into that a little bit more too, and I found out that the constellations are not actually 30 degrees in length. So I started scratching my head a little bit. I said, well, maybe it's close enough. Maybe it's close enough. And so we can still say that, you know, astrology is an observational astrology. But the more I studied, the more I looked into it, the more that I read, the more I realized that the constellations, the stars, are not the zodiac signs. Now, again, this is just something for you to consider, and I'm going to show you some graphics as to why I came to this conclusion. And it wasn't my own conclusion. Speaking with other astrologers helped kind of guide me through this, but seeing these graphics I'm going to show you will help you understand why it finally clicked in my mind that this was the case. So first of all, the old books say the signs are 30 degrees in length, and there are 12 of them, and that makes up the zodiac. All right. Now, astrologers will often point to constellations, stars in the sky, and say, those are the zodiac signs. Now, here's why this doesn't work. Here's why when an astrologer, a Vedic astrologer, a sidereal astrologer says, go look in the sky, it only works some of the time. And if astrology is meant to be a science, it can't just work some of the time. So let me share some graphics with you here so you can see what I'm getting at. All right, so first, what I'm showing you, this is it's from a 4-part series that I've been working on my website, AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, exploring the tropical and sidereal zodiac debates. These are just some of my thoughts in written word. But if we see here, we go to the zodiac, meaning the actual constellations and spaces of the constellations. Here's Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius. And if you notice here, this line here, the red dotted line, that's the ecliptic. That's what, in a sense, it's where the sun moves, or how we see the sun moving, which creates the band of the zodiac. And you'll see that the sizes of these signs are radically different. Cancer is half the size of Leo from this picture. A little less than half the size of Virgo. Aries, tiny. Taurus, huge. Now, the question arises, well, exactly how big are these signs? Well, let's scroll down and see. This is how many days it takes the sun to move through each sign. So it takes the sun 25 days to move through Aries, 25 days to move through this portion here, 38 days to move through Taurus, 38 days to move through Taurus, observationally, meaning that, well, on the 34th day, if the sun was said to be in the sign of Taurus, it's not going to show up in the sign of Taurus within your birth chart, because the birth chart takes into consideration that 30-degree segments. That's why there's not 32 degrees of Taurus, right? You're aware of that. Scorpio or Scorpius, the constellation of Scorpio, the Scorpius, it only goes 7 days through Scorpio, only 7 days. So what we're going to see is that with Aries, it's going to be equal to 25 degrees. Virgo is a total of 44 degrees. And what I started focusing on was this Virgo. Makes sense because Virgo is the kind of sign that one would want to improve situations or really find out what's going on, which can seem to be a critical thing. But it's not. It's just trying to get to the bottom of the issue. So let's take Virgo, and let's say that you've got a chart like this one here. And this is a sidereal chart. And let's say that this is a chart for right now. Sidereally, the moon is supposed to be in Virgo. It's supposed to be in Virgo, which means that if you're a sidereal astrologer or you go to sidereal astrologers and you said, but what about the tropical zodiac? The sidereal astrologer would say, well, if you go look in the sky right now, you will see the moon in Virgo. Okay? So right now we have the moon in Virgo. Now, what is the degree of the moon in Virgo here? It's at 2837, which means it's really at the end of this sign. It's about ready to switch into sidereal Libra. Sidereal Libra. So it's at 2837 of Virgo. There we are, is the moon. But now if we were to go look in the sky, I mean to actually go look in the sky, where would we find the moon? Well, here's the constellation of Virgo. Here's the constellation of Virgo. Here's where the moon would be, the moon's actual position at that same day, at that same time. And according to our chart up here, it should be at the very end of Virgo. But what do we see? It's barely right in the middle of Virgo, which means that in a few days' time, once the moon is said to move into Libra, sidereal Libra, well, where are we going to find the moon? But it's still going to be here in Virgo when it comes to looking in the sky observationally. So the point I'm trying to make at here is those arguments for the sidereal zodiac, that they are observational, it can only hold water some of the time. It's not going to be accurate as often as you think in the same way. Let's look up here at Saturn. Saturn is said to be in Libra. Again, sidereally speaking, at 1049 of Libra. Saturn is considered to be at 1049 of Libra in this chart with the day and time. Now we scroll down, and here's Saturn. You might not be able to see it in this video. I'm not sure how clear it's coming through. But right here, you'll see a shiny spot. You'll see the word Saturn. And what is it in? It's still in the constellation of Virgo. Not even really quite close to the end of Virgo. Libra is right here. Look how tiny Libra is. And according to our sidereal Vedic astrology calculations, the Saturn, if we're going to use observational astrology, that argument should be in Libra. All right, but it's not. Now, I make these points just to get you thinking about what you mean when you're talking about an astrological chart. Because if you're saying the sidereal zodiac is correct because it's observational, you're only going to be right part of the time. When you start getting, for example, a planet, say, 4 degrees past the last degree of the constellation of Aries, it's actually not going to be in Aries anymore, because then it will have moved into the constellation of Taurus. So this is where the idea started to come to me, that there is a difference between the constellational zodiac, the constellations, the star patterns that we see, and the signs as represented by astrology. So keep this in mind. However you choose to rationalize this or think it through, it might take you a while to understand it and to even accept that this is the actual facts of the matter, but it is. What you do with it after that is up to you. But my assessment is that the astrological zodiac is not the same as the constellational zodiac. And the big argument that a lot of sidereal astrologers use is that it's observational. Clearly, it can't be. It's too far off. Now, where does that take us? Well, now the question is, well, what are the zodiac signs? And the zodiac signs are meant to be 30 degrees in length. And how long does it take the sun to move a degree? About a day. About a day. Not exactly, but about a day. So if we understand that, and we can break down the circle of the zodiac along the ecliptic, what we're going to find is that it is the sun's movement that actually delineates what is a sign. When the sun is in this portion of space, and it moves through that portion of space, or when it was in that portion of space, that is what is marking off the zodiac sign, which can often lead people to the idea, most certainly, that the actual zodiac is meant to be tropical. Now, again, we don't have to make that jump right now, because you don't have to. You can easily say, well, there's a star out there that when the sun hits that star, from that point forward, we count that as Aries onward. So you don't have to make the jump immediately to the tropical zodiac. Since the solstices and equinoxes and so on are related to the movement of the sun, it is not a stretch to consider that the tropical zodiac might be based upon the solstices and equinoxes, which would make it, again, tropical. But we don't have to make that jump, because it's possible that there are stars out there that if we know where they are, and once the sun hits that point, that begins a sign, but not because of the background of a constellation. Now, Ernst Wilhelm and I did a video on Ianumshas and so on. That's not yet, I don't think I've got it published yet. Probably not. I think it comes out in December, the way I've got it scheduled. But he brought up a good point that's also brought up in this article. And those of you who want to explore this article, you can go to AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, look for the Exploring the Tropical and Sidereal Zodiac Debate. I think I've got 4 parts there right now, but that'll go into a little more detail about these things. But he brought up a very good point that occurred to me at a different time. And that was, if it's not true that the constellations are the signs, well then what exactly, why did we use these constellations? And we know that it was really about 2,000 years ago when a Greek named the constellations. And that happened to coincide with the union of the tropical and the sidereal zodiac. And the assessment that most people make is that there was a mistake made and that really the sidereal one was the accurate one. But all the arguments that you have towards that, it could equally go the other way. I mean, you could say the mistake was made and we should have been paying more attention to the tropical rather than the sidereal. But again, this is where you're going to go a little crazy thinking about these things, because oftentimes the arguments that you find for one zodiac or the other, the arguments can often be applied to the other one. So I'm sure if I remembered my philosophy background a little bit more, I would know what that meant. That's a particular kind of argument that, one person said, I believe it was Sam Geppy, he said that, the reason people, when they switch zodiacs, they see things working in one zodiac again. I think he said it was the reticular activating formation or system, something in your brain which recognizes patterns, in the same way that, if you want to buy a Camry, a Toyota Camry, and then all of a sudden you see Toyota Camrys everywhere. Have you noticed that? You want to buy a leather jacket, and then you see that same leather jacket everywhere because it's in your mind and consciousness. So now you recognize it, even though it's been there the whole time. And so again, he'll make the comment that it's from the sidereal to tropical if that's the case. But that argument doesn't hold a whole lot of water, because you can equally go the other way. You can equally say, well, you guys are doing that too. So we have to be real cautious about the kinds of arguments that we use when trying to consider a zodiac or what the constellations are and so on, because the arguments are often interchangeable. They don't just necessarily prove one way. If you look at it from the other viewpoint, you'll see that way too. So anyway, point being that, well, why would we use the constellations? And think about it. If every year you happen to see the sun rise on a particular ridge of the mountain, because remember, the sun seemingly moves as the earth tilts and goes around the sun. The position of the sun seems to move, like it'll rise a little bit differently every day. And so that every year when the sun hits a particular mountain peak when it rises, that's the time to plant your corn, just for an example. Well, that's a marker for you. That mountain is a marker. So you don't have to go out and calculate where the sun is all the time. When it gets to that mountain, because that mountain is fairly fixed. In your lifetime, it ain't going nowhere. But as the years go by, that mountain will eventually get eroded or disappear or be strip mined or whatever it might be, and you can't use that marker anymore. So the same thing is actually true of the constellations. Maybe it's not. This is something we have to contemplate and think about for ourselves. So I'm not saying this is how it is, but this is a possibility, and I'd like to hear what your considerations are on it. Maybe it's not that the constellations themselves are the things that we call the signs of the zodiac. Maybe they're just the reference points, that we know that when we see the moon in a particular cluster of stars, okay, the moon is in this particular nakshatra. And then that poured over into the 12 sign zodiac. So think of it like that. The constellations, they don't necessarily have to be the defining factor. They're the reference point, in the same way that with the mountain and the farmer trying to grow corn. You see the sun or the moon or a planet in a particular cluster of stars, you are the astrologer. You've already done the calculations. A good astrologer doesn't need the stars to calculate where the sun is going to be. It takes into consideration the motion of the sun relative to the horizon and all these sorts of things. And just to make it easier, the astrologers then noticed, okay, well, going through all these calculations, which take me forever, I can just remember that when I see a planet in this particular pattern, that it's falling within that zodiac sign. So I hope you understand what I'm trying to get at with this. And this is only trying to challenge you to think more. That's all right? Because at the end of the day, whatever you think about zodiacs, constellations, and so on, just trust me, everyone's going to decide what they think is accurate and they're going to stick with it. And even if something flies in the face of their reason, they'll ignore it. That's just the way it goes. That's, as I say, welcome to the world of people. So we're exploring this to see what it's all about. And whether you use the sidereal or the tropical, think this through, because either way, it's going to help you have a better understanding of what is maybe the science behind it, or the mechanics behind it, or the reality behind it. So it's never, ever going to hurt you to think about other points of view because it will only deepen and enrich your own particular understanding, whatever that might be. All right. But anyway, so returning back to this idea, in this article, let's share the screen again. In this article, I start to define this idea of there's the tropical zodiac, there's the constellational zodiac, or the constellational sign zodiac, and there's the sidereal sign zodiac. But neither the tropical zodiac nor the sidereal sign zodiac can necessarily intelligently be related to the constellational zodiac, because it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't line up in regards to the lengths of the signs. It won't always match up in regards to the charts that you create. And when I ask questions of other astrologers, so do you actually use a 38-degree Taurus? They say no. Do you actually use a 21-degree Cancer? They say no. Somehow they magically get 30 degrees to fit amongst these uneven constellations. And again, that's a tendency towards just ignoring what you don't want to admit. And it might not necessarily be that they don't want to admit it. It might be they just don't know. And that's really the purpose of this discussion, is so when you're talking about astrology and zodiacs, what you're really talking about. Are you talking about the constellations? There is observational astrology. When you notice a planet by a particular star, when you look out and you see a star on the horizon and the horizon is misty or hazy or red, when you see a particular comet going by a particular star, there is observational astrology in that way. But that's not necessarily having to be related to sign-based astrology. So the constellations and the signs are different. And I like to think of the signs as representations of energy fields around the earth, which is related to your spine, which is why, let's see, where are we? This is number 3, which is why in part 4, I start to discuss the tropical zodiac as being a yogic zodiac, because yoga, Ayurveda, all these things are really about being in harmony with nature. Think about it. It's about being in harmony in nature. Why do we call Hatha yoga Hatha yoga? Sun, moon yoga, in harmony with the sun and the moon. And we have these energies within our body. We have these energetic fields that we're working on when we practice yoga and meditation. The spine, where the chakras are related to, that's said to be in relationship to the ecliptic, the path of the sun, which is why when you do a particular kind of yoga, Kriya yoga, and you circulate life force through the spine, it's as if you are living through one holistic, healthy life year of the sun moving through the zodiac. So the sun's movement around the sun is, in a sense, tropically what's defining the zodiac. And it's time and spatially based, not star-based. All right. Now, there's another video I did on the zodiac's relationship to the chakras. So we're not going to get into that. You can find it on the youtube.com/Ryan's Vedic Astrology channel. I don't think I've got it listed on here. But if we think about it, tropically, when the sun is at the very bottom, considered to be at the very bottom of the earth, closest to the South Pole, and we remember that the sun rotates and tilts on its axis, northern hemisphere towards the sun during summer, southern hemisphere towards the sun during the northern hemisphere's winter. So we see this kind of movement going on. And if you follow that movement, they say that when the sun is as close to the South Pole as possible, it's closer to the realm of the Asuras, the demons, the demonic forces, which don't have to be making your head spin and spewing blood and killing you. It's just more worldly energies, which is related to what? Capricorn, Aquarius, and Saturn. Root chakra things, taking care of basic needs. And as the sun seemingly moves up towards the northern hemisphere, the North Pole, when it gets as close to the North Pole as it's going to get, then we have the sun in the signs of tropical Cancer and tropical Leo, which is said to be the spiritual eye center, the highest capacity for development in this world. And so if we can think about the earth like the body, and that we relate the chakras to the signs, which we can see here. You can pause this, come back and look at it. It's also in The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 1. Then what we can see is as the sun is our life force, our Atma, which the sun represents, seemingly moves up and down the earth, it's going through the bands, the fields of the earth represented by the chakras, which are related to the signs. And so when we have the sun in Capricorn and Aquarius, it's going to be essentially down this position, mainly pulling energy towards the first chakra. As we get it moving up, up and up and up, when it gets to Leo and Cancer, when it's as close to the North Pole as possible, what's going to be activated on the earth is the earth's essentially sixth chakra. And since we are the earth, our bodies are of the earth, then our own sixth chakra becomes activated. So really, to practice yoga in harmony with this tropical zodiac, watching the sun and the moon through these positions, can help a yogi, a meditator, a spiritually inclined person to really tap into the harmony of those energies within the chakras when the sun is at that appropriate time period. And if you try to do that with the sidereal zodiac, it doesn't necessarily work, at least not from my experience. But again, this is just to get you to think about these things. And if you want to get more into it, again, go to ashevillevedicastrology.com, find the descriptions. I think it's under the articles section, exploring the tropical and sidereal zodiac debate, parts 1 through 4. That's all I've got so far. Just use it to give you something to think about. And it occurred to me when it comes to this idea of, why can some people use the sidereal zodiac and some people use the tropical zodiac and get the same results? Well, intuition plays a big role. But the other thing occurs to me, being a musician, is that when you've got a musical instrument, you're playing your guitar or you're playing a flute or whatever it might be, or your violin. And let's say I'm playing in the key of G. And we'll say that's like one particular kind of zodiac. That's like Zodiac A. Or we'll call it Zodiac G, just to keep everything straight. So I'm playing my musical instrument in the key of G. And we have Zodiac G here. I'm making a comparison. And then I start playing in a different key. I start playing in the key of, let's say, B flat minor. So here I'm playing in the key of B flat minor, Zodiac B flat minor. Well, in between those two keys, there are going to be similar notes that are the same. Meaning, if my buddy over here is playing in B flat minor and I'm playing in G, and I'm only playing the notes that are appropriate to B flat minor, it doesn't matter that I'm playing only in the key of G, I'm still going to fit with the B minor fellow. In the same way that if the person in B minor only plays the notes in B minor that are the same to the G scale that I'm playing in, we're going to have harmony. We're going to be able to do the same things. The problem is when we start using the full scope of the practice, when we start trying to use all the notes to the different scales, then they start to clash. And that's why an exploration of an astrology, particular techniques, formulas, how it's put together, a systematic approach to it, is going to be the only thing that's ever going to put to rest this idea between the two zodiacs. And that's a hard thing to do, right? Because there are many techniques that we just don't even understand. We're still trying to figure out how they work. And a lot of people who say they understand how they work, they only pay attention to when they're successful, not when they're not successful. So that's like two guitar players getting together, and every time I hit the wrong note for that person's scale, I just say, well, I don't know what that is, so I'll just try not to do it again, or whatever it might be. It's not really learning that there's something different going on there. So the overall message of this video is, number one, first and foremost, please think about the fact that maybe the constellations have nothing to do with the zodiac. The constellations have nothing to do with the astrological zodiac, meaning when you're creating a chart for the reasons described. Consider that when it comes to the difference between sidereal and tropical zodiacs and observational zodiacs, that yes, there will be some overlap because we will be using some things that are very similar. But the only way we can ever really get a sense of, is there one that actually is more accurate or appropriate? We need to really figure out our techniques well, as best we can. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're all doing together. So something for you to chew on for a little bit, ideally to make you a better astrologer no matter what path you choose. The ultimate goal is to make you a better astrologer. Whether you've just learned something that you totally disagree with, at least now you can argue it, hopefully, intelligently. You can counter-argue it intelligently, and I would love to see these things. Because, a lot of our growth in life doesn't come from just accepting something and applying it. It comes from hearing something that challenges us, trying to work it out, and then giving a counter-argument, hopefully an intelligent one. And then that other person, if they're open to it, can say, oh, I see where you're coming from. Let me think about that. So this is meant to be a debate, opening up a debate within our mind, within our consciousness as astrologers, to start considering these things, to improve upon the role and importance of astrology within this world, make it a little more scientific if possible. And it may very well be that astrology is not meant to be a physical science. It's meant to be a metaphysical science. That's a distinct possibility. And if that's the case, none of this really matters anyway, this discussion. And I'm completely open to that being the case if it's ever proven that way. So thank you for taking the time to pay attention. I look forward to your insightful thoughts. And it's been a pleasure.